For joining us on the program. I am Nifemi Oguntoye. We're quite optimistic about all of the things that will happen in the new year, especially the feelers we're getting from government. We heard from Mr. President again this morning. I'm not sure it was a video speech, but we read from him. Perhaps we should put it that way. And it's coming a few days after his maiden media chat, where he also reeled out quite a number of promises. He's talking about the renewed hope agenda again. In his speech today, is looking at positive economic indicators pointing to what seems an encouraging outlook for the new year. Fuel prices, according to him, are gradually decreasing. We hope that that can be sustained, especially with the Warri refinery now at 60% operation. Add that to Port Harcourt refinery, and of course the big one, the Dangote refinery. We hope that the Kaduna refinery will also come upstream in the course of this year. He's talking about foreign reserves rising and that the Naira is also being strengthened against the US dollar. But at the center of it is the skyrocketing cost of food in the market. And that is a challenge the president appears to have acknowledged all through his conversations and communication with Nigerians. And this time is proffering some specific solutions. One of it is increasing production. It's also unveiling the National Values Charter in the course of this year. Another important issue that he's talking about is credit facilities for Nigerians and industries. Our attention this morning is turned to the Nigerian Education Loan Fund. And we're finding out what has happened thus far. We're hearing some new strategies ahead of the new year. I'm joined by the MD CEO, Akintunde Sawyerr. Mr. Sawyerr, good morning and thank you for joining us.
Good morning. Thank you for having me in the studio this morning.
Happy New Year to you.
Yes, and to you.
I'm glad that you took a break. Did you get vacation at all? Because late last year we were still hearing from you.
I'm not sure that we have the luxury of taking vacations
like that.
At this time when we're trying to ensure that we accelerate as many good government policies as we can so that they can translate into something for the people.
It sounds good. We have about 1 hour. We'll open the phone lines at some point and also get some reactions on X. Mr. President last month did say government has disbursed about 34 billion naira in student loan to over 300,000 students across the country. We got some more specific figures from you. You mentioned 326,000 that have applied. But how many really have received payments as we speak?
Okay, so, you know, the way that this system is structured is that as soon as people apply for the loan, we earmark a certain amount of money to ensure that we can cover them. Okay. Beyond that, we've then got to follow a process that ensures that we are paying the right people the right amount of money at the right time. So currently, we have disbursed something like 18.5 billion naira to institutions. Okay. So in other words, they've received in their account that amount of money. Upkeep is paid monthly, so that's a monthly rising cost, but we've actually ring-fenced the funds to ensure that nothing happens to those funds. We've disbursed about 5.5 billion naira so far, and every month that goes up. On top of that, we're getting new applications every month, and we're getting increased
The
numbers.
upkeep gets the students personally, right?
Yes, it goes directly to their bank account. Yes, directly.
So how many students are benefited as we speak?
So to date, we have about 115,000 students who have received both their institutional fees paid and also received stipends. But as I said, that number is growing daily. So as we approve, we sign off, funds get dispersed. So
it's still a far cry from the 1.2 million students you talked about that should benefit from federal institutions.
Sure, sure. It's a far cry from it because you've got to take into account that, you know, we started this scheme at the end of May 2024. And when we set the target of 1.2 million, it wasn't by year end. It's the number of students that we believe will be eligible. So today we have over 335,000 students who have benefited from this. To get to 1.2 million isn't going to take a lot. But that target wasn't set for now. Okay. Like it's an aspirational target, and based on the trends that we're seeing, 1,000 to 1,500 applications a day, it's eminently achievable. But it's not just about giving people money; it's about giving people money meaningfully, so that they're doing the right things, the right courses, the right in the right institution.
Did you say 1.2 thousand applications daily?
I said 1,000 to 1,500 applications every day.
Every day?
Every day is what we're...
So where are we getting the perception from that that there is an enrollment deficit, or that people are not quite aware of the program, or people are laid back in applying for the loan?
So, you know, there's obviously laid back. There's some people who are laid back in applying. Not everybody wants to take a loan. This is for a variety of reasons. Some are cultural. Some are because they don't understand the program fully. Some is because of the skepticism that people have around government initiatives. Our job is to ensure that we remove that fear, we remove that skepticism, we create awareness, and we encourage people to understand that an interest-free loan, which is what this is, that doesn't tie you or criminalize you if you can't pay back, because we don't actually go after people who cannot pay because they don't have the funds. Just getting that message across is the critical thing. Awareness is very high, but the level of misunderstanding is also high. So what we need to do is sort of increase the trust bridge between us and the general public, so that they understand that it's not just something they can dismiss.
I'd like us to measure the challenge of adoption with the real enrollment. As we speak, not everyone who has applied has gotten the loan, yes?
So when you say gotten the loan, do you mean have been disbursed?
Exactly.
You're correct, yes. Not everybody has been disbursed, because we have to follow a process. Remember, we're dealing here with taxpayers' funds, government funds, and we've got to make sure...
How long does it usually take? Let's say I want a loan as a student, and then I apply today. Okay,
so our target, our own target from application to disbursement is 30 days after the processing has been completed. So it can take up to 40 days.
Okay.
However, it's important to recognize that there are some dependencies that we have. So if you look at the process, or if I can explain the process to you, the students apply for the loans. We process them. If everything is right, we approve the loans. Then we send the list, because it's an online process. We send the list back to the institution. The institution has to verify and confirm that those students are indeed theirs. That process of them verifying and confirming back to us can take some time from their end. So we have those dependencies. And until we receive that confirmation, it doesn't go out. So in certain cases, it's taking longer, because we need that final verification from the institution, because we never meet the student.
What are the things you are looking for on your side during the verification process?
Okay, so first of all, the law absolutely requires that we can only give these loans to Nigerians. So you must have a NIN, it must be a valid national identification number.
Okay.
Because it's a loan, you've also got to have a bank account. So you've got to have a valid BVN, because again, we need to be sure that you can receive the loan in a bona fide proper bank account that belongs to you, and that we can actually recover that via the proper banking system for audit purposes. At the tertiary education level, which is where we are mandated to give these loans, the tertiary institutions, colleges of education, polytechnics, universities that are government-owned, either federal government-owned or state government-owned, you need to have access to those institutions through JAM. So you need to have that. The rest of the information is really KYC, but those three critical pieces of information must be there, and they must be cross-checkable, if you like, with those institutions, JAM, the central bank, BVN, and of course, NIMC for the national identification number. Those are critical steps in ensuring that we can approve the loan.
Can students in state-owned universities now apply?
Students in state-owned universities have, not only can they apply, they've been applying and we've been paying.
You've been paying them as well?
Absolutely, yes. Lots of state-owned.
I thought you started with federal institutions.
We did, because with all these projects, you have to phase them in.
You did.
We started with federal, and then we moved on to the states, and now we pretty much have complete data from all of them.
Are there plans for private-owned universities?
The law doesn't allow us to do that. When you say, are there plans, I know that the president is very keen that these loans are available to all Nigerians. When I went to see the president, he said that all Nigerians must have access to these loans. But the law as it sits at the moment only makes it available to those in government-owned institutions. That's federal and subnational, state-owned.
So why do you think there appears to be more enrollment in the north than in southern Nigeria?
Look, I can prefer my own thoughts around that, but I cannot give you a scientific or definitive answer.
Because one would think that, I mean, from the top of my head, you would think that the South will accept it more for obvious reasons.
So let me give a view, okay? And it's a view and an opinion, and, you know, time will tell whether or not, you know, this is something that actually is true. But look, over the years, and I think if you go back to the 60s, you'll find that education was probably embraced more by the South. This has conferred certain advantages in that regard. I think the North has probably recognized that education is something that, you know, must be embraced in order to be able to run the sort of system that we're running. And the North has just taken up the initiative. And it's the right thing to do. We always have to look at what's going on, you know, across the wall, if you like, so that we can take the necessary steps. My guess is that the North has really seen the value of education. I think it's possible that the South may, for a variety of reasons, be sort of being more lackadaisical, more relaxed about it. Maybe they feel that, you know, it'll come anyway. I don't know. I'm not quite sure. I think within the South, and it's important that we're not too generalistic about the things that we say, because you can't apply this to everyone. Within the sort of Southern community, there's also some reticence sometimes that you find about people approach to loans. What does it mean? Is it going to bind me? Is it going to criminalize me?
Can I leave the country afterwards?
Can I leave the country afterwards? All those things are there. And that's why I said to you earlier that it's not just about awareness. It's about really communicating the right messages. Because if you create awareness with the wrong message, people just ignore it and they forget what they've been told. But this is an interest-free loan. It never seeks to criminalize those who are taking it. There's no stigma with it. We're not going to come after people with the police to say you haven't paid, because you don't have to pay unless you've got work. You never have to pay unless you're earning. And also, there's a long moratorium, which means that, you know,
we'll talk about the repayment process,
sure,
because it's a lot of money we intend to spend. Nigeria has to get it back as well.
Yeah, look, and that's a really interesting approach. So Nigeria has to get it back. If we improve the workforce, are we getting it back? We have a workforce of 78 million people. It's growing by 3.5 million people every year. Are we getting it back if we improve our workforce and we get more foreign direct investment or foreign indirect investment into Nigeria? Are we getting it back? You know, yes, we can just look at, you know, the amount of money we're dispersing and what we're recovering. But we're not a business, okay? We are a government that's trying to help our people. And, you know, the primary purpose is to impact our nation, not to count how much money we've made from a loan program.
Can I get this loan for postgraduate studies?
Currently, you know, we have guidelines. So the law doesn't say you can't, but our guidelines are trying to target the most vulnerable people in society, people who are vulnerable from the perspective of, you know, their earnings or their ability to have money, but also vulnerable from the perspective of what qualifications do they have, what opportunities do they have today to get a job. If you've got a PhD or you've got a degree already, you're more likely to get a job, or a good job, if you like, or a better paying job than if you don't. So we're focused on those who don't, so that we can bring them up the ladder as well.
So I've heard you say that you don't need to know anyone to apply or get a loan.
Where did you hear me say that?
A couple of times, actually. But, you know, not many Nigerians believe that, because with systems of our, you know, with systems in this climb, is man no man. So how does that process work? What transparency and accountability are you counting on to say that anybody can apply and get a loan without knowing anyone?
Okay, so thank you. That's a great question, because I think this is really where the crux of this whole thing sits. We took a decision when we're going to launch this program that we were not going to allow this to be something where people could interface with one another. We were not going to allow a system where if you knew the managing director, or you knew one of the directors, or you knew the chair, we didn't want a system where people can actually get any sort of advantage because of the people they know or the person they know in the institution. So what we did is that we set it up as an online application program. That program is linked into other databases. So JAMB, we know, is a critical database. It's very accurate. JAMB has been very, very well run over the years and put it on a solid platform. NIMSI and the National Identification Number Process is another very solid database that's leveraging technology so that we can know who's Nigerian, who isn't, and we can do some data capture around the people, photographs, thumbprint, critical data that's there. And of course, the BVN system. So we are leveraging and sitting on a platform that captures sufficient data to be able to identify you uniquely as an individual. That's the basis on which we receive applications, and we evaluate those applications based on those as 3 primary data points. The 4th data point is that the institution itself holds a database of their students which they share with us, and we can identify students in every institution. Now, what that has done is that it's eliminated the need for anybody to know anybody, because we can effectively help people apply or advise people to apply on a device. The system is run completely, without any human intervention, at least between our operatives and the people who are applying for the.
But there are real people behind the machine.
Yes, there are real people behind the machine.
How do you eliminate their influence?
Well, that's interesting, because at the end of the day, what we do not allow is our staff to engage directly with people who are applying for the loan. Of course, if an individual who's applying for the loan has a problem, they can go to a contact us button on our site, and then a conversation can start. And if it's really critical that we resolve it in some sort of connected way, then there's a phone call that can be made or phone conversation that can be had. But as a general rule, we don't engage with the applicants directly under any circumstances. And if we find anyone doing that, then there'll be quite a lot of trouble, quite a lot of punishment for anyone who's found to be putting up any sort of gateway. We are very, very concerned that we don't want people to have gateways. We want this to be a flat structure. We want it to be totally without prejudice.
And that's important so that the political baggage can leave this idea, because it is a Tinubu campaign promise, right? And there are concerns about how sustainable is NEL Fund and the student loan beyond this administration. And perhaps that's why you have a challenge ahead of you to make it appeal to the generality of the people, whether they belong to this political divide or not. But help me with that figure again. Did you say 150,000 people have gotten loans as we speak?
No, I think I said 115,000.
15,000.
Yes, have actually received stipends.
So do you have a target for this year?
So essentially, we believe that there are 1.8 million people in tertiary institutions in this country that are publicly owned. Okay? Our objective is to ensure that we get to at least 80% of that number in terms of those who are applying for loans. We need to remember, though, that every year there are 400,000 people leaving the system, graduating and going on to the job market, perhaps, or into further studies. There are also 400,000 people coming in. So it's a moving target. Essentially, we want to get about 80% of 1.8 million people to be able to apply for this loan, and then we're looking at about 80% of those who are coming in, 80% of 400,000, also able to apply for the loan. These are targets, they're aspirational, because we don't believe that 100% of people need the loan. We don't believe that 100% of people want the loan, and we don't believe that 100% of people should have the loan. These are targets that are estimates, and we believe that as time goes on, we'll be able to review.
Precisely, how do you determine who gets enrolled next? How do you decide, for instance, that your priority list out of a number of applications?
Sure. So, look, again, with these things, what you do when you start a program like this, you look at what the demand is. You look at what people actually want. You look at what people actually need. So what we've done is we've opened it up and we've said, look, anyone can apply. As long as they're in a publicly owned tertiary institution, they can apply for this loan. So far, we've had about 335,000 people actually apply. Out of that number of, we believe to be 1.8 million. That number is a moving number. But those are the people who've actually applied for the loan. That's happened in about 200 days. We've also recognized that about 1,000 to 1,500 people are applying for the loan each and every day. So, you can see that, we have had to sort of look at what the demand looks like. As time goes on and we look at the funds we have and how we manage that and what commitments we have, because remember, when you give someone a loan who's doing a 4-year course, you commit to 4 years of the course. You can't go to the next year and say, oh, sorry, we haven't got the funds left. So we need to look at the numbers who are applying.
So once you start giving the person a loan, you continue that for a 4-year term.
So they have to apply every year. So once we start giving the loan, this individual has an account with us. They have to apply for the loan yearly, year after year after year, because people drop out, people leave the system. But we, as a responsible lender, ring-fence the funds for you if you are applying for the period of your course, so that we don't get into a situation where we're saying to you next year, well, we don't have money for your 200 level. We're a responsible lender, and it goes back to what you were saying earlier about sustainability. You have to build trust, and you have to ring-fence certain funds to ensure that those who have started can finish, whether it's medicine, pharmacy, 5 years, 4 years, 3 years, or whatever. We have to do that ring-fencing.
Are you committed to paying for an extra year?
What does that mean?
I mean, someone fails and needs to be in school for an extra year.
I'm afraid this is a scheme that's designed, it's not a scholarship, by the way, so we're not trying to fund people who are super smart.
Are you going to lend money for an extra year?
No, so I just wanted to qualify the question for you so that it can be clear what we're prepared to do and what we're not prepared to do. We're prepared to lend people funds as long as they keep passing from 1 year to the next. When we get into the situation where we're saying we'll pay for an extra year, then we'll pay for an extra 2 years, and then an extra 3 years, and an extra 4 years. We're not looking for professional students. We're looking for people who are going to take this seriously, who are going to start and finish, because it's a loan. We don't want people to end up with...
Are you saying you have to pass all your courses to qualify?
We're saying you have to move to the next year. Whether that means passing your courses or not, it varies from course, institution to institution, course to course, what's critical. But the point of applying for the second year means that you actually have to pass into the second year.
Indeed.
So that the idea of paying or giving people loans and putting them in a situation where they can fail and then take another loan, it's not an option. We've got too many people who really need these funds and are serious about getting through.
You have been talking about the dignity of work and the philosophy that requires, I've been reading your status, that require respect for all types of jobs and what have you. We're going to talk about that shortly and what that means for NELFund in 2025. But this is where the conversation gets interesting, because we publicized this interview online, and I found out that there are some real issues that we don't want to gloss over. So some people are actually dropped some comment. Perhaps we can have them on the screen, and then we can have Mr. Sawyerr address them specifically. The first person says, when are we expecting upkeep for Batch C? I got verified since November up to date. No upkeep received. Can we get the second one? Let's take the first three. There's another one there from Black Finance. It says, please, NELFund, kindly disburse the Batch B before you discuss progress. This scheme started paying in July, and we have only received payment twice. Kindly note that our success somewhat depends on the consistency of this project, and we want it to thrive. There's another one. Federal University of Technology, Owerri, will be resuming this January for a new session without payment of school fees. I can't get accommodation in the school hostel. Please, when will NELFund send the fees to FUTO? All right. Let's pause there for a bit. What I found out is that some people are saying they are not getting the fund as at when due. School fees and even upkeep. How do you react to that?
Okay. So first of all, let me empathize with those comments. I think it is absolutely true that in certain cases people are not receiving the funds for a variety of reasons, and I'll try to cover them off in my response. But let me empathize with them, because, you know, when you're in a situation where you're expecting funds and you don't get it, and I think we've all been in that situation, it creates a certain level of anxiety for people. And that anxiety can really turn into panic, especially when there are deadlines to be met. Institution sets a deadline. I think it's important that we put some of these things into the proper context. The first thing is, and I mentioned earlier, we started this scheme at the end of May. It's a faceless scheme. We do not interact with people directly. We work on the basis of trust. That's the second thing I'll say. So we started at the end of May. We interact with people in a faceless scheme on the basis that the technology is telling us the right thing. And then the third thing I should tell you is that there are some dependencies. So when we finish all that is supposed to be done on our side, we expect the institutions to come back to us and confirm that these are their students. This isn't necessarily happening at the sort of speed that it should. Some are very proactive. Some are a bit slower. Some say they didn't see it.
On the part of the institution.
On the part of the institutions. And this isn't about casting blame. This is just about saying, look, there are dependencies. This is a new scheme. And there are obviously clearly some people who are going to get caught in the middle. I'll give you a very simple example. If you look at the what I call the non-branch banks, for example, and I don't want to name them, the ones that don't have physical buildings, we've had some challenges paying upkeep through those because of issues around BVN and verification and the lower level of KYC for you to open an online account.
Some of them were fined recently.
Yeah, so these are issues that we will eventually resolve. But, you know, because we have to protect the funds we have, once funds go out, we can't easily retrieve them. And if they go out to the wrong people or the wrong parties, it can cause a real problem for us. We want to do this properly. And I empathize again with some of these comments because for people who are anxious to either start, pay their hostel accommodation, are expecting they've had 2 lots of payment, they're expecting a 3rd one, and it doesn't come. It's a real issue. It's a real cause of concern for them. And I'm not going to downplay it. But we also have the responsibility to ensure that we act responsibly as a government agency with government money to make sure that, you know, we do this right. But I can tell you the majority of people, that in the 335,000 I've talked about are getting their upkeep, their fees are paid.
The good thing is that you're not sounding like a politician. You are acknowledging the issues and you're addressing them.
I think it's important for us to be honest with ourselves. You know, I don't believe in, you know, coming to a studio like this to waste the time of the people who have genuine concerns, or yourself. I think it's important that we're frank and we're honest because in that way only can we learn.
Well, that's also a New Year resolution that many politicians should take. Let's get more reactions if we can. There's another one. There are a couple of them that we're tracking. There's one from Chris Owowa Ikale who says that at Nelfund, make when I allow MD rest now. Baba said, don't try over the months and it's New Year. Allow a CEO to enjoy time with his family. Omolomo cannot kill Baba. There's no rest for Mr. Sawyerr. He has taken the job. He has to do it. Are you disbursing the previous 4 months stipends to the newly approved students, or you would just start with January stipends?
No, I mean, we will, you know, this is a loan, and once an application has been made, if there is any backlog, we will clear the backlog. We will pay the stipends for the previous 4 months if that's what it is.
Okay.
We won't start from when we disperse. And we've had certain instances where we've had to make double payments.
This one is specifically to you. It's from Ekenedilichuku. I'm sorry, I just got back. That's why I can pronounce it well. Hello, Nelfund. I need help in making this message to reach the desk of Mr. Akintunde. In the last town hall meeting of Renewed Hope, I made a complaint on how to cancel my loan application. Till now, no feedback has been provided. It's urgent and cancellation is needed as soon as possible. How do you react to that? Someone wants to cancel it.
Okay, so first of all, let me acknowledge the fact that anyone who applies for this loan has the absolute right to cancel the loan, to opt out. However, I think it's important to recognize that once you are dealing with funds and people come along and say, I want to cancel the funds, we have to take it through a process that's scalable. Today, we're still working on how we're going to make that happen so that we don't have a situation where somebody who's cancelled then gets billed further down the line. I think it's important that we follow that process properly. I don't know this specific individual, but we've had a number of people say, hey, look, you know, the money finally came through from my uncle somewhere, and that's fair. Or I finally managed to find an alternative to the loan. It's fair. I think we just need to manage it properly and understand that people have the right to cancel their loans. At some point in the future, we're going to find a situation where we will give people a certain amount of time or window before they have to, within which they have to tell us they're cancelling their loan.
I think that answers Emmanuel Agbeta's question also, who said he's about to pay his school fees, which he applied for, and it's been verified. What steps can I take to cancel the loan? Because I've waited and my exam is in a few weeks' time. There was another comment I saw about the fee, the loan coming paid for a fees the student already paid for.
Okay.
How can that be addressed?
Okay, so that can be addressed in one of two ways. In certain instances, because we've had perhaps a late response from the institution, we've then confirmed and we've made the payment to the institution, but sometimes the individual's already paid. Some institutions are making refunds to the individuals who've paid already.
Okay.
So they've received the funds from NEL Fund and they make a refund to the person or to the individual who made the payment. The second way of doing this is to defer the funds to the next session if they wish to retain their loan. If they wish to cancel it, of course, they can cancel it and the refund comes back to NEL Fund, or we hold it at the institution for another candidate. But yes, those are the two ways in which it can be addressed.
Linton Kemi says NEL Fund is already moving to skill acquisition when they haven't been able to manage people's complaints. And that's exactly what we're talking about right after this break. We'll also open the phone line so we can hear from you directly. Stay with us, everyone. Don't go away.
Information is power, information is security, information is knowledge. On Labor Lens, we believe that working people around the world have real questions of their own. They want to know how the world of work operates, what it means to the employer of labor, how policies affect workers in the workplace. On Labor Lens, I ensure we engage effectively the organized labor, organized private sector, and government to get out of them information workers are in need of. I am Sharon Ijason, asking questions that make you get sense of the workplace.
You're watching Beyond 100 Days with MD, CEO, the Nigerian Education Loan Fund scheme, Akintunde Sawyerr, is right here with me in the studio. Thank you for staying the course on the program. So you had that last tweet saying that you're already moving on to other things when there are quite a number of complaints. How do you address that?
Yeah, I think, really interesting, this thing about a number of complaints. If I started giving you statistics about the number of people who are not complaining compared to those who are, it would sound as if we're just gloating. The truth about it is when you have a complaint and it's not addressed, it's 100% to you. So we must always empathize with people who have a complaint because that complaint is very personal and very big to them.
Absolutely.
What I will say from the global perspective of NEL Fund is that we have very, very few complaints compared to the numbers of people who have actually found this to be a system that's worked very well for them. To go to the second part of the question of, we haven't addressed the issues, why are we moving on to other things? Unfortunately, this is a train that must keep moving. We have very high levels of poverty in this country. We have a lot of people who are not on the academic side, who are on the vocational and skills side, who also need this kind of support. And if we're waiting to make sure that 100% of the people on the academic side are happy before we move to those people, we'll run out of time. People need action, they need it now, and we're going to run these simultaneously. We'll fix one wing while we fly with the other, if you like.
We must begin to give status to blue-collar jobs by ensuring formalized training programs that offer certificate of competence. I'm quoting you, that's not a tweet. So let's talk about NEL Fund skills. It sounds like you're diversifying and giving loans to people to learn skills. Is that what it is?
That's exactly what it is. The President, His Excellency President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, GCFR, gave us, when he sent this bill to the, or signed into law this act, which had input from the presidency, the responsibility and the mandate to also train, upskill, support through loans those who need to have some sort of vocational skills training. We've been looking at that area and trying to figure out the best way to make that happen and to make it happen most effectively. It's the President's desire that we do this. I agree. I think we're going to find a lot more people. Where I was talking about 1.8 million earlier, we're probably talking about 50 million people in this country who need to go up a level in terms of their skill to make them more secure in themselves and to help this country move upwards and onwards. It's actually a much larger area of intervention and one that we must find a way of addressing. The challenges are entirely different. We don't have the luxury necessarily of NIN, of BVN, of certainly not of JAM, because the people that we're talking about within this group, within this cohort, are not necessarily people who are as documented as the people in the sort of formal tertiary education system. So we are looking at how we're going to ensure that this works, because again, we need to make sure that if we're giving loans to support these people, two things happen. One, there's a realistic chance that they'll get a job. And secondly, there's a realistic chance that they'll put money back into the fund so that we can help those who are coming through.
But I'm concerned about how structured that sector, that education sector is. Do you have institutions you're collaborating with, or you intend to collaborate?
So there are institutions. There are institutions, skills training centers, and the law allows us to work with those skills training centers. Some of them are government-owned, others are government-approved. We're going to work with as many of them as we can. But these are not institutions that have people who are accessing them through JAM, for example, or any formal system. So the concerns are correct. There isn't necessarily a data-based captive audience within that group like you have in the tertiary side. They are there, but as I said, some of them are undocumented. Some are difficult to track because you're really looking at the bottom of the pyramid in many cases.
Indeed.
It shouldn't be that way, which is why I was talking about giving status to people at the bottom of the pyramid so that they take pride in their work and they have some sort of dignity of labor. We've got to sort of enhance or take this whole social mobility thing and put it into context and actually show why it's needed that we have social mobility upwards, so that we can capture data and you begin to get people to be proud.
You don't think that that industry needs to be regulated first? Because as we speak, who cares whether a skilled laborer or a skilled worker is certified?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I think it needs to be regulated first. I think we need to have proper inspectorates. I can tell you today that you can, if you own a petrol station, you can go out and employ anybody to come and hold a pump, put a pump in one hand, a POS in another, and effectively, without any training at all, you can get people just putting petrol in cars. And
it's even good for business. They like cheap labor like that. I mean, people who have no training at all.
They like cheap labor, but it's not good for business. It's not good for business and it's not good for safety. But that's just one example. The same with most people have gas canisters in their homes. Nobody shows you any sort of competence certificate before they change the gas cylinder in your house, and yet that gas cylinder can blow up. That's not strictly NEL Fund's position. That's more about inspectorates. It's more about the regulatory environment. You know, you'd never find these sort of things happening with airlines, for example. If you're going to work on an aircraft, even if it's a domestic aircraft, it's regulated internationally. The regulation is critical to make this work. It's absolutely critical because, you know, what we don't want to do is end up training a whole load of people, spending a whole amount of cash, and then these people are really no more than glorified uniform wearers. That's not what this is about. So we'll look at, you know, how we engage with sister agencies, with the National Assembly, and with others who can actually begin to say, hey, look, there's a regulation here, or there's a regulatory body there. Why shouldn't they do it? We saw the incredible things that happened with the regulation of food and drugs, with the creation of an organization like NAFDAC. It needs to happen in other places, but it's not strictly for us to do as NEL Fund, but, you know, as a responsible party that's looking after government funds, we have to take an interest in how those funds are dispersed so that we can protect government money.
I believe that the strategy this time will be slightly different because we're talking about reaching out to local communities, people who are not necessarily educated, who probably do not even have smartphones. I used to go in that, do they still have to apply online?
So we're looking very closely at how this can work. So yes, those challenges are there. So how many of these 50 million people The people at the bottom of the pyramid, maybe 20 or 30 million people. How many of them are literate? They still deserve to acquire skills. How many of them can use a device? They still deserve to acquire skills. Are we going to use exactly the same method? No, it can't work that way. We're probably going to be looking more at working with these individuals through associations, through clubs, through NGOs, through companies, through unions, perhaps, because that way we can begin to segment and understand the literacy levels, the education levels. But the whole idea of this is that we have a pyramidal structure where we find ways of moving everybody up a level. Because if we can move 50 million people just up one level each, it will make a huge difference to them and a huge difference to the country. Now, whether we do that, to the degree to which we use technology as an application platform to do that will vary. It will depend. We're looking for ways of doing this so that it's fully auditable, fully trackable, but at the same time, fully practical. We're not looking to build, castles in the sky. We want to do this properly.
Will this also be loan or grant?
So, the NELFund Act, the act under which we run and the funds we have are loans. So at some point, there needs to be recovery of those loans, or people need to pay back, to keep it simple.
Do you acknowledge that it will be more difficult to get them to pay back?
I don't necessarily acknowledge that. I think it will be different to get them to pay back. But the fact that something is different and we perhaps can't see a clear pathway to that payback doesn't mean it's more difficult. Look, there's nothing we're doing here that hasn't been done somewhere else in the world. We know other countries have set up skills training programs pretty much from where we are. Some of them have done it as grants, some of them have done it as loans. There are always examples across the world of where things can be done in a way that actually works. And we need to localize and domesticate some of these things. There are many, many schemes that are going on in Nigeria today, even amongst what I would call the illiterate community, where people are gathering money together, creating clubs, and they're getting money back at the end of the month. You know what I'm referring to.
Absolutely.
So let's look more local, and let's not import every idea from everywhere.
The experience hasn't been quite pleasant, though. I'm sure you must have gotten messages about a family member who collected a loan and you are being dragged because you were picked as a guarantor or what have you. The informal sector haven't really done, in fact, can we call them informal? I mean, those other form of financial institutions haven't done well in being able to recoup their investments in that regard. So I'm just wondering what strategy you are considering that is superior to the experience we've had.
Okay, so you alluded to some of it earlier when you said, what is the regulatory framework for this? And I sort of tried to say that, look, the minute we start to professionalize certain types of work, it generally means that they have to be paid more. It means that people have to show some sort of certification. They have to go through some sort of training.
As it is overseas?
Well, as it is in other parts of the world, yes, over the sea, across the air, whatever. We have to begin to look at ways of helping people become more professional, have more dignity in what they're doing. There tends to be a culture here of setting up a company, putting people in uniforms and saying, hey, look, just go and do the job. Here's the flag, or here's the rope, or here's the baton, or here's the petrol pump. We've gotten to the point where, you see people in uniform, but they've had little or no training. They really don't, and it's not fair. These people can be given some sort of status, just give them some training, give them something that allows them to feel pride in what they're doing. They'll earn a bit more money, they'll feel a bit more dignified, and there'll be a higher chance of payback. A lot of these things are psychology, and we need to begin to think through these things, not just throw money at issues, because when you throw money at issues, the money often won't come back.
Is there a timeline to this skill acquisition initiative?
Well, we're going to kick this off in the first quarter of this year. So we're going to start running programs in the first quarter of this year. We're going to do a wide level of engagement with the general public, because we'll need to understand it's a very large group of people. We're going to talk to companies. Look, there are lots of international companies, I can tell you, who are dumping their goods in Nigeria and are not necessarily investing anything in training. And so their goods are being misused, mishandled, misapplied. You know, we're going to engage very, very widely to ensure that stakeholders are, whether they're here or elsewhere, as long as Nigeria is a market for them, we're going to engage with them to come and support these types of schemes. They're NGOs who've been helping out in one way or the other over many years. We want to engage with them more directly and see how we can leverage whatever it is they're bringing. The government, the president has made funds available, but he's also allowed us to be able to augment those funds and augment our activities by collaborating with local and international partners. You know, we've talked about, you know, we know about the refineries that are coming up. There's so many industries that have been set up by government that are moribund because we just didn't train the people to go and run them, quite apart from the issue of corruption and the rest of that. But just having the workforce, 78 million workforce in this country, we've got to position and point them to the right skills.
Ibrahim has called in from Kaduna. Good morning, Ibrahim. Happy New Year to you. Ibrahim, if you can hear me, go ahead with your contribution, please.
Hello, good morning.
Good morning. Go ahead with your contribution.
Thank you very much. This is Ibrahim calling from Kaduna. Yes, I would like to thank you for this very interesting topic that you brought in this new year, the beginning of the year. Yes, we know that this very much now is the beginning of school life. Again, one thing that we really want to find out here is this. Please, now, we won't want to know that, yes, what about those in the villages? Because the way we see this education first, hello?
I can hear you.
It's likely on those in the city. What about those in the village? Like most of these students also come from the village, and they are still in the village, at least. Is there any opportunity for us, for those that in the village are able to get transferred? Because why? Some of these villages have no accurate networking. So what are the facilities or what are the strengths or how are you going to do that this opportunity will reach those in the village? We also like to know that, yes, is this very policy going to be sustainable for the government? If yes, how? And if no, why? Please, you should clear the air for us. That is just my little hint of congratulations for all Nigerians. Happy New Year for each of them. Nigeria will be free. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you so much, Ibrahim. Let us start with the village people.
Okay, Mr. Ibrahim, thank you very much for your call and for those very interesting points that you made. You're absolutely correct. With any scheme of government or any scheme that even the private sector is undertaking, those in the cities tend to have the advantage because there's a larger concentration of numbers in cities. So when you're doing sensitization or you're creating awareness, that's where most tend to start. And that's, of course, what we've done. We've targeted institutions. We've gone out and done sensitization in institutions. The next phase for us is to go out and do town halls. So cities, towns, villages, you know, we're going to follow the whole supply route, if you like. We will get to villages. But Mr. Ibrahim made another very good point. I think he talked about the connectivity. We're running an online platform. Everybody knows that the further away you go from a city, the more difficult connectivity is. Yeah. And it's not just in Nigeria, it's anywhere. Again, telecoms companies tend to put the concentration of their connectivity infrastructure where their people are. So we're going to, when we start to do our sensitization in the villages, we're going to go there with specific equipment that will allow people to connect. We're also looking to work with partners who have branches of institutions in the more rural areas, but have internet connectivity in those areas in a safe environment where people can walk into it and actually make the applications there. So we're not going to leave the people in the villages out. A lot of the people who run Nigeria today didn't necessarily grow up in a city. Some of the most brilliant people we have in this country came from villages.
Let me hold you for a minute. He also raised the issue of sustainability. But let's take Paul's call from Enugu. Good morning, Paul. Good morning, Paul. You're on air. Please go ahead with a contribution.
Hello, good morning. Good morning. The question I would like to ask, is this. Those people who have applied, for loan, and now, they have started, they pay their school fees around, the September, October. But the stipend, they have not, paid them for over 4 months. So, they start, to pay them, the stipend, the upkeeping.
Mr. Paul, I think we addressed that earlier, and Mr. Sawyerr mentioned that he addressed it adequately and identified that that is an exception in the scheme. But quickly, do you want to talk about the sustainability issue that Ibrahim raised earlier?
Sure.
How do you sustain this beyond this administration?
Sure. I think that the only way you can sustain any scheme, whether private or governmental, is to ensure that you have a maximum number of people benefiting from that scheme. With government, it's clearly very important within a democracy that you only introduce or keep policies going that the people are going to benefit from and therefore are more likely to vote for you from. Okay. I think our task is to ensure that we get this scheme across to as many Nigerians as possible, both genders, in every geography, the 6 geopolitical zones, in every state, in every local government, because if many people are benefiting from this, it will be very difficult for even me to change the scheme, not to talk of anyone else. If a future administration comes in and decides to take it away, it's going to be very, very difficult. And sustainability is critical for this because these are not one-off interventions. These are interventions that will affect people for the entirety of their course, which runs into a number of years. So we believe, I certainly believe, that the more people we can get onto the scheme as quickly as possible without forcing people is going to ensure that. If it's going to fail, it will be because of sabotage. We're not going to allow that to happen.
Let's take one more call before we go. Benjamin has called in from Anambra. Good morning.
Hello, good morning. My name is Benjamin.
Let's go ahead with your contribution.
Okay, please. My question is this: like in my school, the school fees is 95,000, and the amount reflecting on the NELFON platform is about 165,000. So my question is this: since my school fees is 95,000, how about the balance? How am I going to get it? Am I going to get the balance, or how is it going to be?
Good question. You want to answer that?
It's a very good question. Thank you, Benjamin, for that question. Essentially, what has happened there, when people go onto the site and they want to apply for a loan, the institution must provide us with the cost of that course. We found that in many cases, institutions had not loaded the cost of the course. Perhaps they were thinking about what they wanted to charge. So a lot of people couldn't get through. So we put an arbitrary figure because our system demands that cell is populated. What's going to happen, Benjamin, is that we will end up paying the 100 and something thousand, I don't recall what the figure is, to the institution. They will only deduct what is due for your course, which I think was 95,000. The rest of the funds will be sent back to us. Your liability will just be the cost of the course, no more.
Okay. Good place to end it. I think we've been able to scratch the surface. We're hoping that this conversation will continue in the course of the year. And then the next time we speak, we are looking forward to an updated figure from the 115,000 you mentioned earlier. Right?
Sure. No, the figure will be updated, but more importantly, that the service will be better.
Absolutely.
And that people will begin to get a better experience of what we're doing. That's our objective.
I'm the CEO, Nigerian Education Loan Fund, Akintunde Sawyerr. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for having me here, and I look forward to the next engagement with you.
Absolutely. Compliment of the season, everyone. Happy New Year. I am Nifemi Oguntoye. See you again soon.